Hey everybody, welcome to Pitch Stop. Now, today's my turn. Mentioned that the last podcast episode, and it's a little different. We're not doing it through Zoom this time. I'm pre-recording, and the other guys are going to watch this and record it as well. So it's a little different than what we usually do, but it's because I'm going to be out of town. Now, sadly, because I have been busy, I haven't been able to write a overwhelmingly awesome Red Hood movie, but I'll give you what I do have so far. So if you don't know much about Red Hood, perfect, because that's kind of what this movie I'm hoping will lean to. I have right here, it will open up with a memory of Jason Todd bringing a fourth tire from Batman's Batmobile. So he's stealing Batman's wheels, and you see him stacking it up in an alleyway. And then he turns around to see Batman looking at him. And then I'm thinking it will do a quick cut to a warehouse with a single light inside. And we're going to see Jason Todd in his Robin outfit sitting under this light. And you just see like flickers in the silhouette of the Joker walking around with a crowbar. Now, mind you, this is a pretty dark movie. I mean, Batman. What do you expect? So he's walking around him with the crowbar and then makes a few comments and then starts to smack Jason Todd. Once he makes the smack, you get another quick cut to Batman taking Jason to a boarding school meant for troubled kids. Now, during this time, Jason ends up witnessing that there's a underground criminal activity going on at the school. So he runs away because he doesn't want to be part of all that. And then who does he run into? Batman. And Batman's wondering what's he doing out of that troubled school. And Jason elaborates and tells him what he saw. And Batman goes to investigate to find out that Jason wasn't lying. He was telling the truth. And so I'm thinking at this point, we kind of get a see of how Batman's thinking to himself, this kid has potential to be Robin. Because after his first Robin, he leaves, becomes Nightwing. And now he has another young man who is currently struggling and is troubled. I got a temper and everything like that. So then he ends up taking him as a new Robin. So then it goes to another cut. Now we're all seeing the background over and over up to this point right now. So we get another cut, and then we see Jason on the ground bleeding as the Joker's standing on top of him. And the Joker comments on how Jason doesn't seem to talk much. Now, this comes from, you may recognize this kind of scene from the Batman movie Under the Red Hood. It's pretty similar to that. It's kind of where I got a lot of these ideas from. But I'm not copyrighting. There's a difference. So he makes that comment, and then Jason turns his head and smiles. And then at that point, Joker kind of realizes that Jason isn't like the first Robin. And so he's like, I'm going to teach you manners or something. Mark Hamill will come up some line, I'm sure. If whoever plays the Joker, which I'll get to that in a bit. But he starts laying into him with the crowbar. And then it goes to another cut and my bad, wrong point. So now we see Batman on his motorcycle flying through the streets with the warehouse in view that Jason's at. And as he gets closer, according to the comics, this is what happened as well. The warehouse explodes. Batman thinks Jason's dead, goes up to it, finds Jason's body, pulls him out. And then now we cut to the present day. In the Batcave, we see Bruce looking at Jason's costume, the one that you see in Batman vs. Superman, is kind of my thoughts. I know the director said that it could be, it couldn't be. He never really gave a clear answer from what I remember correctly. We're going to go with it. We're going to go saying that's Jason Todd. So he's looking at the costume, and Bruce is, the camera's going to focus on Bruce and Robin's beat up costume. And then you see a blurred figure walking in the background. And then it focuses in the whole scene. You see Alfred as Bruce says something about like how this was his biggest failure. How could he not be there to save Jason in time? Because that was a kid he was trying to take care of and help out. Then Alfred gives his Alfred advice, encouraging him like, It's not over, Bruce. Whatever. Yeah, I have the high ground. That's not what he says. Then they get a call from Commissioner Gordon about a murder. And when they arrive on scene, it was a criminal who was in the act of committing a crime, but has been shot. Batman notices that it was a shot from a .308 round. For those who don't know, weapons, .308 rounds, a kind of a hunting round. It's pretty big. Can be considered a sniper round. And he traces the round to a sniping point on a building a little ways ahead. So he goes to that rooftop and he finds there's nothing there, not a single trace to follow. At this point, Batman's a little confused because, for the most part, people will leave some sort of trace. Maybe a shell, maybe a little bit of dirt from a mat laying down so they could lay down, or tripod markings. But he doesn't find any of that. So he's thinking to himself, there's only a few people who's probably capable of doing something like that. He's thinking to himself, it could be either Deadshot or it could be Deathstroke. Now, these two are very good at what they do. But what confuses him, and would probably confuse the audience, is why are they trying to take out criminals? Like, what's that connection there? And as he's making this, we go to another spot, another roof, a little ways away in the shadows, and we see the back of a character. And he's observing Batman, checking out the scene. And then we hear Jason Todd's voice as Red Hood at this point. And he says something like how Batman is too soft. The criminals won't hesitate to take a life. So in order to stop them, we have to eliminate them ourselves. So now we get to see how Red Hood is more of an anti-hero. How he, kind of like the Punisher in Marvel, he only sees bad and good. So if he sees the bad, he just thinks take him out. Unlike Batman, who wants to just throw him in Arkham so they can escape getting blah, blah, blah. I kind of agree with Red Hood on some things. But that's my personal opinion. That's literally all I have written down. How are we doing on time? Is it still going? Okay, sweet. So kind of going from that, now I'm going to be winging it, even though I've been thinking a lot about it. So as we're seeing throughout this series, how much time do we have?
I'll get my glasses.
Okay. So as we're seeing throughout this movie, is we get to watch as Red Hood is taking out criminals left and right. And Batman is always like one step behind. And eventually when they meet each other up. Now this is the part where I kind of took from Batman Arkham Knight. Is at this point, Batman has kind of tracked down this person. Tracked down whoever's killing these criminals, who's also like raiding places to get weapons and stuff like that. And he ends up getting into a fight with him. And he notices that a lot of these moves are very similar to his own while he's fighting. Now, mind you, for the cast, as far as that goes, I'm thinking we still keep Ben Affleck as Batman. I think he could pull off that kind of brutal nature at first. And it would kind of lead to why he started killing in Batman v Superman, is because ever since this moment of when Jason died. But now then he kind of fixed his ways in the Justice League. So now we get to see him realizing like, oh, this guy is doing kind of the same thing I was doing before I kind of realized that I became what I really didn't want to be. And as for Red Hood, sorry, it's a little jumbled, but like I said, kind of rushed. Red Hood, I was actually thinking, instead of Robert Pattinson becoming the new Batman, what if he became Red Hood? Those were kind of my thoughts for Red Hood. Obviously, the Meads and Jed are probably going to be coming up with different characters, which would be awesome. They're better at picking a cast than I am. And then Joker, I think we keep Joaquin Phoenix, and then Alfred, Jeremy Irons. So basically, the cast that we've seen in the last movies, it's kind of more just an extension to build up another character for Red Hood. And in the end, to kind of sum it all up, just because I am running out of time personally, we get to a point where Jason is let go by Bruce. And he kind of goes off and does his own thing. And he'll start to think to himself of what happened. Think to himself, how can I still stop crime, but do it my own way? Because he still thinks Batman's too soft. But he realizes that it's not Batman's fault. It's just his ideals. And that's kind of what the whole movie I was thinking of if I had more time to write it. I was thinking it'd be very much a battle of ideals, because I kind of enjoy that. So, I am going to go ahead and end it there. It's going to be a short pitch stop episode, so I apologize. If the other guys, if you can make it longer, go for it. Be my guest. But otherwise, I'll catch you guys next week.
Well, that was a good pickup by Robert, who does nothing on this show. But we appreciate, having the workload thrust upon us, as usual.
Yes, Robert does nothing around here. It's all on us who have the much harder job of sitting here and listening to your creative work and just thinking, this is what we like, this is what we didn't like.
Nothing to build upon at all.
I'm used to my therapist listening to me. I don't want to listen to your problems.
In all fairness, though, it was actually a very good pitch. There was a lot of substance to it, and I really liked a lot of it gave us a lot of meat to think about, not only what we would do, but kind of how we would go with what you gave us, because you really did give a lot to work with.
Absolutely. And one of the things I did like is you tried to stay true to the media that you have seen, and that media in return tries to stay true to what it was based on with the graphic novel, The Return of Jason Todd. And that's something I appreciate, because something that can happen and has happened in comic book adaptations, such as that awful Catwoman movie, is they try to take something that's kind of established and then ignore it completely and do something different, which can work to its advantage. I would say Star-Lord looks a lot better than he does in the Guardians of the Galaxy comic books, but when they're pretty established, and like Jason Todd is in the Bat family, you want to keep his basic roots about the same. That's something I did really appreciate in this version that you would like to adapt.
You didn't need to include the stuff about Joker doing this elaborate scheme of saying hey, your parents are back, and luring him in that way. You did keep the most important parts of it, just how Joker tortured him, Joker killed him, or at least as far as Batman knows, and how that impacts Batman going forward, and then later how Jason Todd feels about how everything went down. That is the most important core of that story.
For myself, I just enjoyed how it was presented from a filmmaking perspective, because as we've done the pitch stop, Jed and I, we've talked a lot about story, whereas for Robert, he's talked a lot about how that story is presented. I enjoyed because I could see it in my head playing out. Just the Joker, for every strike he does to Jason Todd, it could cut back to a flashback where Batman learns to trust Jason and learns to bring him into his life. Because it sounds like he's trying to push him away at one point, because it's like, well, you're a troubled youth, you did something that impressed me, but I don't want to be responsible for another kid. But then he proves himself, he lets him into his life, and then crap hits the fan and things go bad, and this is his second worst memory of all time.
Yeah, second only to watching his parents die. And in a lot of ways, the reasons why he didn't want him to team up in the first place kind of came true. You're like, no, you'll get hurt. This isn't the right life for you. Yeah, it happens, and so that kind of sets up why the Batman that we're introduced to in Batman vs Superman is a lot more bitter and cynical. I forget exactly how the saying goes, but I heard someone say once that every cynic is actually just an optimist who learned that life is cruel and you can't have hope. And so that kind of fits with what happened to Batman. he had a glimmer of hope. Maybe things can be better with Jason Todd. Loses all of it.
Absolutely. And I like the fact that it could still connect to the Snyder universe, just like it did in the comic book adaptations where, Jason's suit is on display, that Robin suit, and in the Batcave, and that's kind of inspires the Batman to be as violent and cruel as he is. And the reason it can still work is because in Batman's mind, and I would argue even Bruce's mind, is that the Jason that he knew, Jason Todd, as far as he's concerned, is the boy that died under the Joker's hand. And that Red Hood is this abomination that just woke from the Lazarus pit, or however you decide to bring him back. And I think that correlates really well, and I think that it allows that Pattinson idea that he had for him to play Red Hood. I think that works really well because, one, he kind of looks like him, and two, I think he could play the arrogant side really well.
Yeah.
And that's something that I'm glad you kind of mentioned when he smiles back up at the Joker as he's beating him, because that's something that no other Robin would do. Jason's he's a little bit of a psycho even before he gets out of the Lazarus pit, so it's very telling of his character there.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things I loved about your pitch, it kind of reminded me of Daredevil Season 2, where initially you're kind of presented as, hey, it's Daredevil. The show is called Daredevil. Daredevil is going to be the protagonist, and we see Punisher at the beginning. We see that there's a conflict of ideologies between them, and we know Punisher is going to be the bad guy. But as the show goes on, we kind of see that they're both kind of a protagonist, but they're very flawed heroes, and you see how each of their approaches, how they're flawed and how that ties back to their own personal flaws. And then it ends with not really them teaming up, but them, helping each other with each other's problems and kind of learning to let live and just say, look, I can't change the way you do things, but maybe we both can learn a little from each other, but let's part ways for now. It's a good way to have the conflict be more philosophical and not let it devolve into, well, this side is clearly the right side. You can watch, after watching it, you can talk with your friends, well, I kind of lean on Batman's side. No, Red Hood is clearly right in this.
What I thought was interesting, I was just thinking about it a little bit, is the idea that Joaquin Phoenix's Joker shows up, and I thought it doesn't have to take away from Jared Leto if it goes with Jed's Flash pitch, where it's including multiple universes. And what if Jared Leto's Joker found Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, and he uses him as a patsy? It's like, well, he'll know that I'm responsible, but he won't be able to prove it because it's a completely different guy, and he's a psycho, and it's just sort of the sick, demented, twisted thing Joker would do. Maybe he appears in his timeline, and he's like, oh, well, the way to get out is you've got to, basically do what I say, or you've got to kill somebody. You got to beat him to death with this magic crowbar, and then you'll reappear in your own timeline. Or if you want to stay here, you have to beat that guy, because maybe he likes this world better.
Right.
And so I just thought, that's one way you could do it, and then Jared Leto is still responsible for that, but he's not the Joker that does it directly. He does it indirectly through somebody else that he can manipulate.
Right, and just building off of that, just something from the Flashpoint movie, which is kind of what Jed did reflect upon, is this idea of a ripple effect. So it would kind of make sense if, time has been messed with, that, for a time it could be another Joker appearing. I don't think you would need too much encouragement to beat somebody to death. But I kind of like that idea, as well as the idea of just introducing a side of Batman that we don't get to see very often, especially in live-action films, where, he's a troubled parent, even an adopted parent. The only best example is probably the Lego Batman movie. And that's just him learning to deal with a son, well, what would it be like if Batman did lose a son? We've seen the aftermath, but how does it feel when that son isn't dead and is actually doing the exact opposite of what you were teaching him? So, two shocks into one could really show into the character of Batman and the idea of morals. It's something that could be really, if done right, and I think with Ben Affleck and Pattinson, it could be done really well.
Yeah. One of the ideas that came to my mind as I was listening to the pitch was, in the original Red Hood storylines, we kind of have the two of them, Batman and Red Hood, fighting over the Joker, and why did Batman let the Joker live and all this, which I think is a really interesting conflict. But what I think could maybe be done a little differently in this version is, since we the Joker in the DC universe, we don't really know exactly what's going on with him right now, whether it's, going to be Joaquin Phoenix moving forward or Jared Leto if he's going to return at all. So we know he did for the one scene in the Snyder Cut, but we don't know if there's any future plans with him. What I thought we could do to kind of just get around that whole issue is maybe have the criminals he's taken down, instead of being like Joker thugs working up to the Joker, maybe be like a Gotham crime family, like maybe the Falcones or the Maronis. That way, these are people that Batman is trying to pin crimes on and see if he can put them away forever, whereas Jason Todd is putting them down. It kind of leans more towards the gritty side of Batman, which Red Hood lives in, not the colorful, wacky side. And then you could kind of have Batman start to end up protecting this crime family just because of he doesn't think that they should die. And so it'd be an interesting kind of way to give conflict to Batman as he's in the story, like, these are bad people, but because of my ideology, I have to protect them against your ideology. It leans into that battle of ideologies that you talked about while still giving us something fresh that we haven't seen before. I don't know, would you guys try to add anything to that pitch that you heard?
Let's see. What I would like to see is maybe a little more hints to Superman. So, not so much in the story, but actually, no. I think that would be a good way. Is maybe a conversation with someone outside of Gotham with Batman. That was something that was done in the cartoon adaptation when he goes to talk to Ra's al Ghul. I think that's how they say it in the cartoon. And I think it would be nice to have another side of that coin. Is maybe he does talk to Ra's, but I think it would be also interesting to have him talk to Superman, who is an adopted son, and so and has dealt with coming back to life, especially if this is a connection. In fact, that might be the best way to end it, is maybe on that hopeful note. He talks to Superman. How do I do this kind of moving forward? And Superman says, well, Jason is still out there. All you can hope is that everything good that you've taught him is going to shine through, because I know it always does for you, Bruce. And he can decide to decide to clean off the graffiti off of the Robin armor and display it in the center of the cave, and just kind of like an emblem of hope. And so instead of ending totally sad, it's like, well, yeah, Jason is out there and he's kind of a monster right now, but there's this potential for that good side of him to show up again. And I think adding Superman being the message of hope, kind of just encouraging Bruce to keep moving forward, I think that would be kind of a nice thing, and it would show that friendship that could be developing over time.
Right. Kind of have that little, just that hint of hope at the end, kind of like how at the end of Empire Strikes Back, everything is lost, oh, woe is me, this is so sad, everything is awful, but there's still that little bit of hope that, like, it's okay, I've got a new hand, and we're going to go rescue Han. It's not like Infinity War where it's just doom and gloom and it just ends like that.
Right. Or I would even argue The Dark Knight, which does have a little message of hope.
Yeah.
But that's the thing that I think is missing from Batman films is it doesn't have to end so dreary, and, unless it's building up to something else.
Sure.
And this, you could argue it is, but I think it would be nice just for once coming out of a Batman film thinking, you know what? Yeah, life does suck, but we can keep moving forward. We can still learn. We can still grow, and people can change.
Right.
And that's kind of a message that's in Batman v Superman.
Yep.
Batman's monologue, so just to reaffirm that, both through more Superman-esque way, just encouraging it, and it would be just a nice way to tie the two stories together.
Yeah,
especially with how we're kind of leaning towards how Justice League is will have more dark side, so good way to build up right before the scarier stuff.
I like Jed's idea about the mob families. I was just thinking, what would be add to Justice League and add to the overall story is to add one more character, but not in a major role, just as an influence. If you add Deathstroke and have him be the guy who resurrected Jason Todd in this version, just because he's like, I took your pupil, Batman, and now he's doing things my way. He's like, yeah, maybe I can't control him. Maybe I don't want to anymore. Maybe I want him to do all this stuff. And he sort of leaves that message for Batman, which could lead to a potential Batman film where he finally faces off with Deathstroke. But it's just another insult to injury that Deathstroke is responsible for this. And he's the one that arranged for these crime families to get protection or whatever. When really he's just orchestrating their fall so that they get off the streets and
he can consolidate power.
Right, he can accumulate their power for himself. And he just uses Red Hood as a means to kill them all.
Right, and that actually could be a great way to connect with Zack Snyder's cut of Justice League. Spoilers for those who haven't seen, but they do change the ending with Lex talking to Deathstroke. Lex Luthor reveals the identity of Batman to Deathstroke, and so that has a lot of potential. That could actually really work with this being part of his revenge scheme against Batman. Which they hint is how he lost his eye. So I think that could be a really fun idea.
Yeah. Do we want to talk about like potential directors or things like that we think could work well with this movie?
Yeah. Let's go ahead and do that quickly. I can't think of who else to cast. I kind of am with Robert on this with as far as Batman, Alfred, the same as the CU, and Pattinson. As far as a director, I don't know. I would say who directed Seven?
Oh, that's David Fincher.
I think David Fincher would be a good fit.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of like a straight up action movie that he's ever done. I think the closest would be the movie The Game, which was it was actually leaked that originally when Ben Affleck was going to be writing and directing his own Batman movie with Batman and Deathstroke, it was going to be loosely based off of The Game. So I do think that he could be a great pick for a Batman movie like this.
Okay. So that's mine.
One of the ones that came to mind for me was Gareth Evans. Gareth Evans. I always confuse him with Gareth Edwards, who is the director of Godzilla and Rogue One. But no, Gareth Evans was the director of The Raid, or The Raid Redemption and The Raid 2, and he was going to be directing a Deathstroke movie for DC, but that kind of fell off the deep end when the Batman movie was handed over to Matt Reeves instead. He's great at action and crime drama, but I still think that, tone it down a little from where he is usually at. He likes to work in the rated R range, but if we do like a hard PG-13 with action reminiscent of like The Winter Soldier or The Dark Knight, you can get away with PG-13 while still having it be very grim, dark, and violent.
I was thinking about the director of John Wick.
Oh, yeah.
Just to be able to test
Chad Stahelski.
Yeah.
Just to be able to test his mettle in dramatic, more of a dramatic thing instead of just pure action. Because we know he can do the mob bosses, he can do the guns, he can do the fight choreography and all that. Excellent. But to get him to do something a little bit meatier, something that has a little bit more drama. So,
because there's moments of drama in the John Wick movies, but it's certainly not the focus.
No.
It would be good for him to broaden out his resume. Though for action, he's never going to go wanting, I don't think.
Oh yeah, he's impeccable.
No, that would be an excellent choice. Especially just thinking of his other pants called the gun fu that's in the John Wick films.
Right.
With Jason Todd usually wielding two pistols. That could be really fun to see, especially with Batman deflecting them and doing things like that. That could be a really fun overall thing. But any other suggestions, casting?
Maybe for, it's not a casting, but I think a good person to score this might be Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. They're the musicians behind Nine Inch Nails, but they're also, Academy Award winning composers. Like they did the score for The Social Network, they did the score for the HBO series Watchmen, and I believe they were nominated for an Emmy for that. They might have won. They're really good at kind of like, they do non-traditional scores usually for their stuff, but they've proven to be pretty good at, like raising tension and kind of feeling like not like super heavy action like you'd see in like Mad Max Fury Road. It's like but it's still tense and it gets you on the edge of your seat while being kind of not subdued, but not not like downplaying it, trying to make it feel like naturalistic and not distracting you. You're watching it and you're invested in the action. You're not like, oh wow, this music's really cool.
Yeah, no, I like that. And especially since the action would be more personal anyways.
Right.
That would make sense. But any other thoughts from you, Stefan?
No, I don't think so.
Excellent. Well, we are at about roughly 22 minutes here. I think we're pretty excited about this idea, and we look forward to doing the next one. It's going to be mostly focused on Red Hood, so it'll be presented by me, the best one, at bragging about it. So.
We'll see.
All right, but thank you for joining us. Click the like button, because I'm not going to say it the other way.
Thank you.
And subscribe if you find our voices eloquent. If you do not, then you need to see a hearing doctor. Maybe a hearing.
Make sure if you like what you see here, don't just like and subscribe. Recommend this to your friends and family, people who you think might be interested in this. It's one of the best ways for us to grow, and it'll guarantee that we're able to keep giving you this content that you like.
Absolutely. And get better merchandise.
Yes.
So, as you can see, we're a little sparse. We're not real nerds, I guess.
Not yet. We're broke nerds. There is a difference.
We're broke nerds, exactly.
Send us money.
Stefan's not about that big in life. He's about statements. Send.
Yes.
All right. Well, until next time, goodbye.
See you later.